Stand in front of this temple, and your eye keeps looking for the joins, the seams between the blocks, the line where one stone was set on top of another. You won't find them. There aren't any, because this building was never assembled. No foundation was ever poured. No block was ever lifted into place. Every wall, every stair, every carved god you're looking at was already here, locked inside a single mountain of black volcanic rock. And someone spent a lifetime cutting everything else away until only the temple was left standing. They started at the roof. They worked downward into the dark. 200,000 tons of solid stone cleared away by hand. Iron chisels, one strike at a time. Now hold on to the detail that makes this almost unbearable to think about. They could not fix a single mistake. You cannot pour a mountain back. Cut too deep, and it stays too deep forever. Every one of those millions of blows was permanent. This happened in the 8th century in Western India. A king ordered it. Men whose names nobody wrote down finished it. And for 1,000 years since, people have walked into this courtyard, looked up, and felt the same thing you'd feel. A slow, cold disbelief. How do you carve a building this exact out of one rock, downward, blind, with no second chance and no way back? Stay with me, because the closer you look at this place, the less it behaves like something 8th century people should have been able to do. And by the end, the question you walked in with won't be the one you leave with. This is Kailasa, and it may be the most impossible thing human hands have ever attempted. It's out in Western India, in Maharashtra, along a low ridge of dark gray basalt that most people would drive straight past. The place is called Ellora, and it's already one of the ancient world's quiet miracles. More than 30 caves are cut into this cliff, Buddhist, Hindu, Jain, chipped out over roughly 5 centuries by generation after generation of monks and stonecutters. Nearly all of them were made the same way people had made shelters in rock forever. You pick a cliff, you dig in, you hollow out a room in the dark, and you carve the walls where you find them. It's punishing work, but the idea behind it is something a child could understand. You're making a hole in a hill. Then you come around a corner, and one of them breaks every rule you just learned. Kailasa isn't cut into the cliff. It stands apart from it, out in the open air, with sky on every side. Walk into its courtyard, and there are gateways, halls stacked 2 stories high, bridges of stone, shrines, tall pillars, and elephants the size of real ones. And not one piece of it was ever carried here. It all came out of the same unbroken block of basalt. It's not small either. The main tower climbs about 30 meters. That is a building of rock as tall as a 10-story block. The pit carved around it, roughly 80 meters long, close to 50 wide. 2 stone flag pillars over 15 meters high. A row of elephants runs along the base, and each one looks like it's carrying the whole weight of the mountain on its back. All of it was once buried inside a hill, waiting. Around the middle of the 8th century, a Rashtrakuta king named Krishna I gave the order that started it. He didn't ask for a shrine. He asked for a mountain to be turned into a temple for Shiva, a stone twin of Mount Kailasa, the Himalayan peak where the god was said to sit at the still center of the universe. It sounds like a line of poetry. On the ground, it was one of the most frightening instructions ever handed to a builder. No foundation to level, no wall to knock down and redo, no cracked block to quietly swap out for a better one. One mountain, and every blow took something out of it that could never go back. So picture the first morning of the job. A blank black hillside warming in the sun. No temple yet, no courtyard, no pillars. Just rock and a crew standing at the bottom of it. Somewhere inside that hill was the masterpiece the king wanted, whole and perfect and completely invisible. And the task was never really, what do we build? It was, how do we take away everything that isn't the temple? And answering that meant one decision so strange it still feels backwards 1,200 years later. Picture the last building you watched go up. Foundation first, then columns, then walls, then floors, and the roof goes on last of all. That's how building works. It's addition. You start with nothing and you climb. And if something goes wrong down low, you can usually take it apart and have another go. The crew at Kailasa were locked out of every part of that. They weren't allowed to add anything, because there was nothing to add. The whole temple was already there, sealed inside one enormous block of basalt. Their job wasn't to build it up, it was to cut it free, and that flips everything. Instead of starting at the ground and climbing toward the sky, they climbed to the top of the mountain and started carving the roof. Read that again. The roof. First. They opened deep vertical trenches down into the hillside until a giant island of rock stood cut off from the cliff behind it. That island was the temple, still hiding inside. Then, month after month, they cut down into it. The roof line, then the towers, then the upper walls. Only when a level was truly finished could they drop to the one underneath. There was no climbing back. The instant you carve a roof, you seal off the space above it forever. Get a measurement wrong up top, and that error rides all the way down and lives in the finished temple for the rest of time. Even the work site felt inside out. No scaffolding ever rose into the sky because the mountain was the scaffolding, and every layer they cleared dropped the floor they were standing on a little lower. And here is the cruel part. The job got harder the longer it went. Less daylight reached the bottom of the pit each week. Every basket of rubble now had to be hauled up and out instead of tipped down a slope. Most big builds get easier once you're past the ugly early stage. This one got heavier every single day. And for years, the crews were cutting toward rooms they could not see, pillars they had not reached, staircases that were still solid rock. They weren't shaping something in front of their eyes, they were shaping something they could only hold in their heads. Which drops you straight into the uncomfortable question. How do you strip away an entire mountain and not, at some point, put a chisel straight through the masterpiece hiding inside it? Start with the raw weight of it. 200,000 tons of basalt came off that hill. Some estimates run higher. Nobody argues about the scale. That's a fleet of loaded passenger jets, chipped away with hand tools, on bare rock, in the Indian heat. And there was no quarry somewhere else to blame it on, because the site was its own quarry. Normally you cut waste out in one place and build in another. Here, the waste was the building. The same swing that knocked loose a chunk of rubble was also shaping a wall. Every basket of broken stone that came up out of that deepening pit dragged the finished temple one step closer to daylight. Then, gravity turned on them. The deeper the courtyard sank, the farther every scrap of debris had to be carried back up. Thousands of baskets a day, climbing, each trip a little longer than the last. And all the while, the rock they left standing demanded a precision that makes your hands sweat to imagine. Waiting in that mountain were free-standing elephants, bridges linking one shrine to another, square courtyards, rows of columns, all of it a single piece of stone. One careless blow could take an elephant's trunk clean off, or split a pillar it had taken years to reach. And there was no spare, no repair, no block number 2. The mountain gave you one attempt and watched you take it. Try to stand in one of their days for a second. Black rock throwing the heat back at you, the endless ring of iron on stone, bouncing off walls that climb higher around you as the floor keeps dropping. grit in your teeth. Somewhere along the rim, a master with the entire plan in his head, watching where every blow lands. You finish a corner you will never lay eyes on again the moment the next level opens beneath it. And tomorrow, you go a little deeper, into a little less light. Those men weren't only cutting stone, they were guarding something they couldn't see. And the real riddle of Kailasa isn't how much rock they carried out. It's that, blow after blow, year after year, they always seem to know exactly which rock to leave. Almost everything people build forgives a mistake. Wall in the wrong spot? Pull it down, build it again. Even the great cathedrals of Europe were braced, corrected, and half rebuilt across lifetimes as their masons learned the hard way. Kailasa gave nothing back, because carving is subtraction, and subtraction has no undo button. Shave too much off a column, and it's thin for the next 1,000 years. Cut a ceiling a hand too low, and it never rises again. Land one bad strike across a carved face, and centuries of somebody's planning vanish in a heartbeat. Now carry that, not for an afternoon, for decades. So walk through it now and really look. The courtyards still sit square. The towers still rise in proportion. The floors come out flat. Stone bridges hang between structures that were never joined. They were simply left floating in the air as everything around them was carried away. The elephants still stand under the walls like they're holding them up. Fine, delicate carving covers surfaces that spent years buried in solid rock. Then go looking for the wreckage. Where's the pillar that came out too thin? The hall that ended up crooked? The room they started, ruined, and walked away from? On a job this size, worked entirely by taking away, the hillside should be scarred with wrong turns and dead ends. They're weirdly hard to find. The stone behaves as if the people cutting it already knew, before the first strike, precisely where every surface was going to stop. And that's the moment this stops being an impressive old ruin and turns into something stranger. The question isn't how they carved it, it's how they knew what to leave. Quick thing before we go there, because what comes next is the part that genuinely doesn't add up. If you're the kind of person who loves it when the easy explanation runs out and the real mystery starts, hit subscribe and ride with me. That is the whole reason this channel exists. Okay, back to the mountain, and the one question nobody has fully closed. This is the part that keeps people up at night, and it's the strangest thing about the entire site. To carve top down and never make the one cut that ruins everything, the builders needed something close to a complete three-dimensional picture of the finished temple before a single flake came off the rock. Standing on a bare hilltop, they had to already know how high the roof would sit, how thick a wall had to stay after tens of thousands of tons disappeared from around it, and where a pillar would land on a floor that didn't exist yet, 30 meters down in the dark. No photographs, no steel frames, no way, that we know of, to see inside solid stone. Take the simplest problem they faced, just staying level. Build up from the ground and you can always check yourself against the flat earth under your feet. These crews had nothing like that. They were cutting toward a floor that would end up 30 meters below where they started, on a natural slope, and it still had to come out true. So they carried their references down into the pit with them. Plumb lines, water levels, measuring rods, marks transferred from the surface. And they had to trust them completely, because by the time a wall actually appeared, it was far too late to move it. Let the angle drift a couple of degrees, repeat that all the way down, and the temple leans or twists or simply refuses to line up. It doesn't. It comes out square. The shrine at the heart of it lines up with the courtyard at the entrance, as cleanly as if the whole thing had been drawn out in full and then just uncovered. And maybe, in a way, that's exactly what happened. Because this wasn't one gifted man with a chisel. It was generations of them. Kings came and went. The faces on the crew changed completely. But the vision never wandered. Every new set of hands understood exactly what the last set had intended and kept cutting toward the same temple. The whole thing grew out of one unbroken idea, carried in human heads across a lifetime and pressed into stone. That's what modern engineers keep circling back to. Not the carving, the coordination. Thousands of decisions you can never take back, made by hundreds of people across decades, and not one of them ever loses hold of a design that only exists inside their minds. For a long time, this got filed under beautiful mystery and left alone. Then people started measuring it properly, and it's worth hearing how they react. Put a structural engineer in that courtyard, the kind who's spent 30 years telling clients what can't be done, and ask a plain question. Could we build this today, the same way? One rock, top down, by hand? Hand them lasers and computers and modern survey gear, and maybe. Take those away and leave them with 8th century knowledge and no way to fix a mistake, and watch how few of them will look you in the eye and promise it. A sculptor answers from somewhere different, because a sculptor lives inside subtraction. They know in their wrists the exact fear of the cut you can't take back. On a carving you can hold in 2 hands, that fear is already sharp. Blow it up to the size of a building, and their awe gets very specific. It is the awe of a professional staring at a risk they would never in their life agree to take. And a geologist just points at the rock. This isn't soft sandstone you can shave and shape. It is basalt. Dense, hard, and brittle. Push it too hard, and it can crack without warning. Go too gently, and you'll barely dent it in a year. These builders took one of the least forgiving stones on Earth and came at it with the least forgiving method there is. Notice what none of them reaches for. No lost machine, no forgotten super technology, nobody from another world. Every one of them points straight back at ordinary people. Human hands, iron tools, and a level of planning and sheer nerve that we simply didn't expect from the century that made it. So here's the honest end of the mystery. There's no hidden machine buried under Kailasa, no secret power source. What's hiding in that mountain is something quieter and stranger, a way of thinking that runs backwards through everything you assume about building. We build by adding. We start small, we climb, and we lean the whole time on the comfort that if we get it wrong, we'll fix it next time. These people did the exact opposite. They began with everything, and they built by taking away. Their genius was never in what they made. It was in what they had the discipline to leave, and in seeing a finished temple inside a blank mountain, clearly enough to cut their way down to it without the right to a single mistake. They couldn't undo, so they couldn't afford to be unsure. And out of that impossible rule came something almost nobody else on Earth ever tried at this scale. Something we still cannot casually reproduce with all our machines. 1,200 years of earthquakes, monsoon floods, invading armies, and fallen empires have rolled through Ellora since. The Rashtrakuta kings are gone. The names of the men who cut the mountain are gone. The tools rusted to nothing centuries ago, and the temple is still standing exactly where it has always stood, not set on a foundation, not stacked from blocks, still part of the mountain it was born out of. That's the quiet shock of the place. The strongest thing at Ellora was never actually built. It was revealed. Stand in that courtyard, and it's easy to forget what you're really looking at. You're not looking at a structure at all. You're looking at the empty space where a mountain used to be. And that same fingerprint of enormous ambition, this genius of subtraction, this flat refusal to accept the limits we assume ancient people lived inside, keeps surfacing at other sites, scattered across the world, that supposedly never had a word to say to each other. So tell me in the comments, which impossible place should we cut into next? Because when its builders turn out to have known far more than they had any business knowing, the real question stops being about them. It becomes about us, and how much we have quietly managed to forget.